Hey guys, today's interview is brought to you by the Kulkarni Law Firm, and I'm really lucky to have our guest today. I'm really excited. We're going to talk a little bit about the Dobbs decision. We're going to talk about restricted access, what happens when you have drugs, devices that used to be available, and now they are being restricted, whether it's a result of political, legal issues, such as the Dobbs decision, or as a result of drug shortages. What is the impact of that? So if you are a pharmacist, you probably care about today's discussion because it has real world impact on what you're doing. If you're a leader in the pharmacy world, you need to be able to talk to your patients, your pharmacists, and go, here's how we are going to form a policy. Here's how we're going to deal with this situation. Today's guest, I'm really lucky to have him, and I've had him on before. He is the chair of pharmacy practice at Butler University College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. He is unfortunately extremely humble, so I had to make him tell me more about his background so I could actually recite it. He is also the president of the board of directors for the Alliance for Safe Online Pharmacies, and then he adds Dash Global. I don't actually know what that means because I have to ask, why aren't all online pharmacies by nature global? But I'm going to learn more about that. Just for those people who are interested, he is going to be presenting in Orlando this Friday at the upcoming Florida Society of Health System Pharmacy presentation. And a link of that has already been provided. So if you go to YouTube, you should be able to get this. He's also writing a textbook on contemporary pharmacy leadership, which I imagine is being rewritten as we speak in light of the Dobbs decision. He's going to talk about contemporary pharmacy leadership, management, and entrepreneurship practice, and it's going to be out later on this year. And he is lucky enough to be actually going to Spain very soon, and he's going to be talking about some really cool things. I'm going to ask him more about them. And here are links to the Spain link is right there. If you want to go meet him, you should click on that link. You should go there. He is going to be there, and I'm very jealous of you to actually because you're going to meet him. So again, our guest for today, John Hertig. How are you, John?
I'm doing well, Darshan. Thanks for having me back on the program.
Thank you for coming back. So the exciting part of this is there's something new going on. The really sad part of this is why this new stuff is going on. And I'm not trying to make this a political discussion. We're just dealing with the social ramifications of what court decisions impact. As a lawyer, I'm fascinated often by, here's a really interesting legal thought process. And as a pharmacist, I'm dealing with the ramification of that really interesting legal thought process. And here's what we have. The Dobbs decision came out a few weeks ago at this point. I want to say it could be a few months. I really can't tell time anymore. But a few weeks or months ago. And it basically said that each state gets to decide whether they're going to allow for access to drugs that can cause abortion, to drugs that can be used for avoiding pregnancy and the like. So talk to me a little bit about this situation. First of all, you use this term restricted access. What do you mean by that? Is this an official term, or is this something that the FDA has defined, or is this something you're defining in safe medical practices?
Yeah, thanks, Darshan. I do think connecting it back to contemporary leadership and kind of leading healthcare, leading access, being knowledgeable about issues that face our patients, and then how we can help them access safe healthcare is vitally important, no matter whether you're a pharmacist, allied health professional, or anywhere in between. So that leadership piece is really, really important. When we say restricted access, they often go hand in hand with shortage. Usually when we talk about drug shortages, which is a still significant issue, it's a shortage that's occurred in the supply chain for a variety of reasons. It could be a manufacturing plant has gone down. It could be the FDA hasn't provided a clear clearance for a particular product for a variety of good reasons. But for whatever it is, or it could be like what happened with Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico and knocked out an entire production facility. So shortages happen for a variety of reasons and really do impact, usually because of either regulatory or practice issues. Now, restricted access is a little different in that access to particular therapies, whether they're medicine or procedures, is restricted either because of policy decisions or legal decisions. And that's what we're seeing with Dobbs. And in many states that are reviewing their own policies and laws to determine what can patients access in their state. And so I think you mentioned it before. This is a politically neutral conversation because we're not here to comment on the decision specifically, but anytime you have policy decisions or legal decisions, you have these social ramifications, and this one happens to be significant, involving healthcare access, which is why I'm really pleased that we're going to be talking through some of those particular issues today, Darshan.
So I love that we're talking about this. So let's talk a little bit about this. So we've got a scenario now where, and this gets thrown out all the time, which is you've got 10-year-old girls who may be pregnant, who were possibly raped, probably raped. I didn't follow that specific case, which is why I'm going to assume rape for all obvious reasons. But she obviously needed access to abortion drugs. She possibly had to cross interstate lines to get it, and that caused all kinds of issues. My question for you is, what is the duty of a pharmacist, of a pharmacy leader in scenarios like this? Because let's be honest, the patient, a 10-year-old girl, is going to go look for options. And if you're saying she cannot cross state lines, what other options does she have? She's going to then try to look for drugs within the state itself. So talk to me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, that case is particularly horrible. And some of the details around that I'm familiar with, because that poor girl ended up in the state of Indiana to get her abortion. I think it was an Ohio resident who came across state lines into Indiana. And I believe that was done via procedure rather than medicine induced.
Sure.
I don't know if that nuance matters as part of this conversation, but fundamentally, here's how I see this as a healthcare professional. Everyone has a right to safe and effective healthcare. And to get safe and effective healthcare, you need to have access to safe and effective healthcare. And that access can come from a variety of different ways. We struggle with financial access. We struggle with geographic access. And we also struggle with legal and policy access. And with Dobbs, we're talking a little bit about legal and policy access. When you restrict healthcare and when you restrict access to medicine, it oftentimes doesn't necessarily change the human behavior or human need to still get healthcare. That's what I think might get missed a little bit in some of these policy decisions. Is yes, I understand, maybe don't agree, but understand with some of the rationale. But people are still going to need contraceptive care. They're still going to likely need abortive care. And so they're going to go look for that, whether it's crossing state lines or whether if in case of a medicine or another type of device that helps with that need, likely go online, because that's where we're used to going to find things, right? And so you're used to going and Googling it. If you can't get it at a brick and mortar store no longer in your state or a brick and mortar clinic, you're going to Google whatever that need is. And that's where we get into significant trouble with regards to safe and effective care. Darshan.
So when we lined up in this scenario, talk to me a little bit about what data is out there about how patients access this. Obviously, they start the search online. One option is what used to happen is they could go into their local pharmacy and say, I need this drug, I need this device. Option two, go across interstate lines. I mean, a poor 10-year-old girl has to go across interstate lines and try to get access to this care. But option three is probably the most dangerous option, but you're really well placed to speak about it, is order it online. So talk to me about what research exists on how this gets accessed and the impact on care.
Yeah, I appreciate your interest in that, Darshan. I know we've talked about it briefly in some of our previous conversations, but the world of online drug selling and access to care is immense. I mean, at any one time, there's approximately 35 to 40,000 online drug sellers. National Association of Boards of Pharmacy estimates that about 94 to 95% of those are operating illegally in some way. And for definitions on that, I think you can refer to some of our previous conversations, because it gets into the nuance with regards to definition. But many of those thousands and thousands of online drug sellers are selling these products without a prescription, without any type of medical consultation, which is vital. It's still vitally important in this area of healthcare. And if you can't get it at your brick and mortar store, you're probably going to Google it. And our research has shown that 7 out of 10 patients, so 70%, think that those first page search results are validated or vetted by some sort of regulatory or statutory authority. So they think the FDA or someone else has signed off on your Google results, which is absolutely not the case. And many of those first page search results are going to take you directly to illegal online drug sellers. It's not like this is happening just in the dark web or in the fringes. It's happening right in front of your face on Bing or Google or DuckDuckGo. And many of those are selling those products without a prescription. Those products, many of them are substandard or falsified. They're not real. And so not only are you getting that needed care that you're seeking because you can't get locally, but also you could be getting something that's dangerous or deadly because it contains some type of poison. And so it's going to actually harm you, which is why we're so concerned, those of us that do work in this space, about unwittingly driving consumers and patients online to get access to care, because we know that care online is not necessarily safe or effective. I'll also say another thing about our research. We did a really comprehensive research review of about 187 articles on harm associated with purchasing products online. Really comprehensive, systematic review. And we found, when we looked at the types of products, kind of classified types of products that are causing harm online in the different buckets, from highly referenced, meaning there were lots of examples of them, into like low reference or with fewer references. In that higher reference bucket, you have things like opioids and analgesics, pain meds, right? You have diet drugs, you have cancer agents, and you have drugs that are on shortage and that are restricted access.
Wow.
Those are the drugs that are causing the most harm to our people online globally. So when we have this issue with Dobbs, and when we know that restricted access can drive people online, we're very concerned in the patient safety and pharmacy community about our patients getting harmed going.
So I don't even know how to respond to some of that information, because you're kind of blown away by the fact that people are going online to access, for example, cancer drugs, going online to access medicines to take care of themselves. And some of it's being driven by addiction, some of it's being driven by straight up disease, and some of it's being driven by political pressure. In all scenarios, what also worried me is you might go online, you might spend this obscene amount of money, and at the end of it, the drug may not only be unsafe because you have no idea what the controls are, but it may not even work for what you actually expected. So, and some of these things, for example, drugs that might cause abortion, you have a limited timeline. If you go outside that timeline, you already are skating on thin ice, and that's just compounding the problem. So I guess my question for you from a leadership perspective, how do you guide the next generation of students? How do you want them to start thinking through these problems?
Yeah, I really appreciate that connection back. And you're absolutely right. There are a variety of reasons why people are driven to the internet. Cost, convenience, and access are those big three that we always talk about. And, it could be cost as simple as I feel like I can get a better deal online. It could be convenience, where you're just like, I'm tired of going outside. I'd rather it just be shipped to my door. Or it could be this really important access question, whether it's restricted access or access issues, geography, or others that we've talked about. But it is a sad situation when you feel like the only option that you have is to buy your cancer drug online because you can't get it or because you can't afford it. That's a horribly tragic situation. And that's a failure on us as healthcare providers in making sure that those patients are getting safe and effective care. I would put some of the conversation around contraceptive and abortive medicines in the same bucket. And that's somewhat of a failure on us, because if we can't help people access safe and effective care, then we are not providing that human right that I talked about earlier. And so as you're a pharmacist, and as we're training that next generation of pharmacy leaders, it's vitally important that we're equipping our students and our learners with this skill set in terms of advocating for our patients, making sure that they know what to do. We're not going to force pharmacists to fill drugs that they don't believe in. And so there's still a respect for your right as a human being to maybe object to filling. But if you're objecting based on perhaps a religious or political view, then you need to then provide another option. You just can't say no and you then restrict access. You have to say, you know what, I don't believe in this, so I think I can't do this, but my pharmacist who's next to me can, or the pharmacist down the street can. Let me call for you. So you have a moral right to yourself to stand by your beliefs, but you have a healthcare responsibility to make sure that those patients are treated effectively. And I think starting to reframe that discussion and give people the power to do the right thing and advocate not only for themselves in this scenario, but also for their patients is training pharmacists on leading the next generation, and is training that next generation on being equipped with the skill sets to make sure that we're providing safe and effective care for all.
I love the thought process, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. And the devil's advocate version of this is, let's say I'm the pharmacist who's going, it's against my religion. I can't offer you a drug to cause abortion. But in fact, not only can I not offer this to you, the state won't let me offer it. Would you consider going across interstate lines? At that point, does the pharmacist possibly expose themselves to liability? Because if the position is, and I found this fascinating, yesterday's news was the IRS, I believe, is now considering how to take a tax deduction if you're pregnant, because so you have to possibly have to prove that you were pregnant at that point, but you theoretically could get that tax deduction. But if the position is of that state that a fetus is a life, are you then involved in alleged manslaughter at that point, or allegedly involved in the process that might lead to manslaughter? Do you think, as pharmacists, we're being caught in the middle of a political battle between, ignore the left and the right, but between the needs of the patient and the needs of the fetus? And how do we handle that?
Yeah, well, we are going to be caught in the middle. I mean, there's no getting around that. And I wish I had a really clear answer to all those questions, but we're in a fractured system right now, and I don't think anyone has really good advice on how to navigate that. A couple thoughts though in response, because I'm not going to totally cheat out of your question. Is one, we have a responsibility as pharmacists and as healthcare providers to advocate for what we feel is the right path, and so we need to be able to educate each other and educate policymakers on how to help navigate this really complex environment. We need to be a part of that discussion, because if we're not a part of it, it's just going to happen to us. And that's I think that goes back to that contemporary leadership and training the next generation to really get involved in these issues. The other point that I'll make is, we as pharmacists, as many other health professionals, took an oath. If you're a pharmacist, you took the oath of a pharmacist, which is to help provide safe and effective care and therapy to students, or as students and as practicing pharmacists. So that oath does apply. And we just need to figure out how to integrate that oath, same as other health professionals, into the current political and policy environment. It's not an easy question to answer, but we know we need to be involved in the solution.
So it's interesting. You made this mention on today's news again, is an extremely red state like Kansas was considered. Did you hear about this news?
I did hear about it. Yeah, they voted to protect it, I believe was the result.
Yeah, correct. They for those people who didn't follow and don't know what news we're talking about, essentially there was a constitutional amendment that was proposed that would take away the right to an abortion from the Kansas state constitution, and the voters voted against it. So the question is, as we as pharmacists get more and more caught up in these battlegrounds, because we are at the end the front lines of healthcare. If we get caught up in these battlegrounds, the question that we have to start asking ourselves is, how do we as leaders come out and help the community decide what is the right path? And some of these might be having these conversations with our patients, saying these are factors that affect your lives, and having these discussions. And that can result, for example, in options at the state level, at the state legislature level. In that specific instance, I believe it went a little far, for lack of a better term, in that it said no right for abortion, even in emergency scenarios, which I think that's a little harsh, because theoretically you're saying you don't have any autonomy over your body, even to the extent it harms you. And that's really, I mean, I struggle with terms like that being thrown around in general, irrespective of your political philosophy. I think that you don't think anyone should be harmed. So I start with that as an initial principle.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and you're right on, Darshan. We have the only bad decision here is to not engage at all, right? We have to be engaged in that dialogue at the state level. I'll put something else out there that I think is an important comment. One is, the more fractured our healthcare policy and system is, the more difficult it is to get access to safe care. Same way, the more fractured our supply chain is, the more likely it is that criminals take advantage of it. So, there are criminal enterprises out there that are already taking advantage of this policy decision because they know that it's going to drive people online, and those criminals are waiting for them. And they're ramping up their efforts to take advantage. So anytime you have a fractured healthcare system or fractured process, you have a much more challenging time navigating it effectively. And also you're opening yourself up to being taken advantage of by criminals who get it, and they're smart and they know exactly what's going on and they know human behavior. So that fractured piece is something we really got to try to fight against as much as we can.
So let's sort of, again, I keep taking I become a devil's advocate. If I was this alleged criminal, I would say what you just described is a huge problem. You're saying your patients need this care. Your patients don't have access to this care. I'm providing a service to those people who are most vulnerable, who need it the most. Am I not a good person in this scenario? So as someone who is, and I love how you phrase the president of the board of directors for the Alliance of Safe Online Pharmacies, how do you respond to a response like that? How do you enable these alleged criminals to be in the right spot? How should they position themselves better?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. You're talking about the Robin Hood mentality, right? And I think I know there are good actors out there that are providing a needed service. The problem is they are few and far between. And so when I throw out numbers like 35,000, I have a handful that are the Robin Hoods doing the right thing, but the vast majority are just taking advantage of you. They're stealing your data, they're stealing your identity, they're providing substandard or falsified product that at best doesn't work, at worst harms or kills you. And then we have criminals on there not only selling medicines that are falsified or substandard, we're also finding products. So you have implantable devices, you have IUDs, intrauterine devices, you have rings, you have all these things sold on websites without a prescription, without any medical evaluation, and they're sold to you with a YouTube video to say, here's how you insert your IUD yourself. Good luck. Now, that's horrible. That is just a scary thing. But these are the types of criminals that these patients are flocking to unknowingly. It's not necessarily the Robin Hoods out there trying to do the right thing.
So let's reframe the question. Let's talk about these safe pharmacies, right? So this wasn't just about the Dobbs decision. This was about leadership. This was about doing things right. There are all these pharmacies out there that are doing the right thing. These pharmacies are online. They are providing access. I see ads for them every single day on my TV, on the news. What are they doing right? How are they addressing these needs of shortages? Or are they not in the business of shortages and they just sort of, they're more commercial, they're more capitalistic, and that's what they're going after?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because there are telehealth and telepharmacy companies that are good and that are using the internet for good or provided a needed service for patients. And what they're doing is really helping with access more than anything else, Darshan, because of either geographic or other concerns. Maybe it's a sexual health patient that's afraid to go into a clinic and they want to stay anonymous. And so they're using telepharmacy or telehealth. And that's a really good thing for patient care for us all. So, those people do exist. They're going about it the right way. They're providing a legal service. They're using drug that's FDA approved. They're getting the right approvals from all the regulatory authorities. And they're really, really changing the conversation when it comes to being able to access care. Those are the people we want to be pointing patients towards. There are ways to find those and make sure that you're not falling into the criminal trap. The National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, or NABP, has a safe pharmacy checker on their website. You can just type in the domain and then it'll let you know right there instantaneously whether that website has been found to be safe or whether it's found to be rogue or illegal. That's a really great step for patients who are looking to try to find access to safe care.
So freeprescriptiondrugs.com is probably not the right place to start from.
No. Or buy Canada Drugs, we got the best ones here.com is probably not good either.
Which raises that other question though, doesn't it? Which is, so far we've spoken about crossing interstate lines, but what we also spoke about in the context of drug shortages was cancer drugs, which can be extremely expensive in the US. And we know about literally caravans of people going up into Canada to buy their drugs so they can continue living. Do you see and there there used to be there's never going to be a scenario where we can import drugs from Canada, but the FDA, the US FDA has conceded this point. They're looking at ways to enable that to happen. But do you see, as a pharmacist, a way of enabling the access of drugs from Canada to and possibly from Mexico to address these issues of drug shortages, to address these issues of access, to address these issues of affordability?
I have to be optimistic here and think that there's a pathway forward. But all the proposals that I've seen or that have been put forward in Congress have been pretty bad when it comes to patient safety, not to mince words. Because what you're seeing is, look, you have these caravans of patients that are going over. Let's just use Canada as an example. They have a really well-run health system. They have a really safe supply chain. There are neighbors to the north, right? And so you have these caravans going north. The patients that are going and doing that in person and going to a brick and mortar pharmacy, I am not concerned about at all. I think that's, I'm not going to comment on everything, but, I think that's fine, from a safe and effective standpoint, because they're getting a medical evaluation. They're seeing a real pharmacist. They're buying real product. Like, that's fine.
Are they getting a medical evaluation, though? Because I thought they'd literally just walk into pharmacies.
No, well, they still need a prescription. And so they have to have an evaluation by some physician to get that prescription.
In the US or in Canada at that point?
In Canada.
Oh, interesting. So they first go see
a medical evaluation for sure.
Interesting.
I don't know how robust it is. I'm not in the room, right? But I assume they're getting something because they're walking in with a piece of paper to get a prescription. Now, where I'm very concerned about is that we then extrapolate that to the internet, because then you go to the canadadrugs.com and assume it's in Canada when it's really hosted in Brazil and it's run through Mauritius, and you have no idea of where that drug's actually been. Now now that's problematic. Right? Because you're not necessarily getting that same level of care or oversight that you would in person. That's where the importation conversation gets really, really challenging, is that you can't just open up Canada because you don't know what Canada is online, because there's no transparency. And there's actually a piece of legislation called the Drugs Act that's in front of Congress now that's looking to increase transparency and looking to make sure that the FDA is armed with the tools that they need to successfully regulate. And that's something that we should be supporting if you ever want to, move forward with that importation policy.
So that really raises that question. So what can we do about bad actors? One thing you can do about bad actors is don't engage. But that's sort of like, to me, that's the equivalent of when you're taught in school, the best sex is no sex. And you're kind of like, look, realistically, is this really going to be successful? Realistically, saying don't use online drugs is probably not the right direction to go. You need to give people options. And it reminds me of sort of streaming, where I'm old and practically decrepit. I remember when you used to have Napster.
I was just going to say, Napster. All right.
Exactly.
I like it. Yeah.
And you used to download videos and you used to watch them. It was great. I really shouldn't say that, but it was great.
It was definitely not legal, I think. But, yeah.
Right. But then eventually Netflix came along. They said, we'll give you licensed content. We'll give you, you pay for it. We pay the appropriate people, and we can tell you good quality. You aren't going to be downloading all those viruses you were getting. This is basically the equivalent of that. This is the healthcare equivalent of Napster, where you don't know what you're getting, except instead of downloading a computer virus, you're taking whatever shows up at your doorstep, and that can cause all kinds of issues. So from a what you could do at that time is block, for example, certain sites, certain streams, or I forget what they were called, but whatever they were called at that point. But my question is there a way to address these bad actors online? Is there a way to notify them? Is it distributors? Is it websites? Who can you talk to?
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying I haven't heard Napster mentioned in a very long time. So you get the award for bringing up Napster. And I do know what Napster is, so that's good. At least we're contemporaries. The challenge with these online actors is there are so many. And really what we're trying to do is tackle this from both the supply and the demand side. And I may have mentioned this earlier, but you have the supply side, which is all these websites, many of which are operating illegally. Anytime you shut one down, it's like whack-a-mole where two more pop up. Many of them are outside the jurisdiction of the United States. And so as hard as our DOJ works and the FDA and the DEA, they're all trying to do the right thing and shut these things down. They keep popping up. And so although the law enforcement piece is vitally important, and the individuals who are doing it are incredible people, and I have so much respect for them, it's such a challenging task because of the pure volume. And so in addition to supply, we also got to be working on demand. And that brings us back to healthcare, right? And that brings us back to pharmacy leadership, where we need to make sure that our patients aren't unknowingly demanding or going to these websites because they have better access, because we're pointing them to the right websites, because we're pointing to the right telepharmacy, because we're providing them with a different safe option from a person who understands the issues and knows it best, because we're that front-facing healthcare provider. That will hopefully decrease the demand while our our justice and law enforcement colleagues are working on the supply side, Darshan.
Which is really interesting, I think. And again, we're well past time, but I just want to add this component to that. Addressing that demand side, I think, is something we can do as pharmacists, because we're at the front lines. We're talking to these patients every single day. But the other thing we can do as pharmacists is educate them. And let's be honest, as much as I love our pharmacist colleagues, they're busy. And education is really hard. And I think that's exactly where hopefully a channel like this, hopefully other channels, other online information, educates patients to understand what the stakes are, helps patients understand how they can do it right. Not just saying no, but saying how to do it right. And I think that's going to be more and more important. As a educator, how do you enable resources for patients to make better choices?
Yeah, it's awareness and education. I love that you mentioned that, Darshan, and you have to educate in as many different ways possible. And it's not just educating our patients and providers; it's also educating ourselves. As pharmacists, we need to know the issues and then be armed with those tools to be able to help people. And that's referring them to the right websites, checking to make sure domains are safe, providing care options. If you can't do it, then someone else can. But it's making sure that you're taking those action steps and engaging in that dialogue with the patient, because ultimately that's what we're here for, right? Is to make sure that all of our patients have a right to safe and effective care.
I love it. On that note, we're going to call it, because we're well past time. My question for you is, how can people reach you?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is email. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but email is perfect. My email's there, and then my LinkedIn's pretty easily searchable. It's just J Hertig is my handle there.
There you go. And again, where are they going to find you if they manage to get a passport and travel internationally?
Yeah, come track me down. I mean, Florida does seem international at times, but I will be in Florida this Friday at the Florida Society of Health System Pharmacy meeting. I'll also be in Sevilla, Spain at the International Pharmaceutical Federation meeting, which occurs in the middle of September. So if you can't track me down virtually, hopefully you see me in person. So
just to clarify, is it pronounced Sevilla? I always thought it was Seville.
Well, I think either works, but I believe there they say Sevilla. But you know what? I'll let you know once I'm there, and we can validate and confirm.
Yeah, thank you. I think that'd be good. Again, John, this was amazing having you on. Thank you again, and can't wait to have you on again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Darshan.